Mini episode 1097 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1097. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris. We have one of our favorite guests back with us here today. This is a gentleman that we've had on many times on the show, often but not always, talking NFL. That's going to be our subject today. The NFL New Year has just begun. Happy NFL New Year, everyone. And as I've been saying to my friends in Cleveland this week, Merry Becksmas, because the biggest news out of the bunch, and again, as I indicated to this gentleman off air, I don't think it's just me being a biased lifetime Browns fan. Odell Beckham Jr. to the Browns. We will get thoughts on that and much, much more from, as I say, one of our favorite recurring guests, Mike Harmon of Fox Sports Radio. Of course, you can catch him every night with Jason Smith, 7 to 11 Pacific time, and, of course, Sunday mornings as well, 6 to 10 Pacific time. And as I have alluded to in the past, I have earned, I'm sure, many a stern frown from my pastor for coming into church a little bit late on Sunday mornings because I'm in the car and I just got to stick around to hear a little bit more. And again, any show he's on is better for it. And we always love having him here. Mike Harmon. Mike, welcome back to the show, my man. How are you today?
That is a long intro. I'm going to have you be my hype man up and down Santa Monica Boulevard, maybe get a little sandwich board to go along with it, and really promotion. No, fun times this past week, just fast and furious, the action, sometimes the head on the swivel, more than a few double takes at the dollars and cents. But in the end, it's not my money. Go have fun with it.
Exactly, yeah. I do pride myself on my hype man skills, by the way, so thank you for noting.
That was good. No, I like that.
Thank you. And, let's just go inside the process. Let's go inside your shoes for a second here, Mike. On a week like this, when you've got news breaking, a day like Wednesday, that's the day that it's official, that the signings can begin, and you've got the tampering period earlier in the week, but then you got the Beckham news happening earlier in the evening. And when you're getting ready to go on air and you're the first show that kind of comes in clean after a lot of this stuff has happened, you're not having to reflect on it on the air, but you're digesting what's happened in the previous few hours. What's that like? That's got to be an incredible adrenaline rush.
Oh, no, there's no question about it. I mean, because you look at it, the way it paced through, at least for this week, and then years past, much the same, as you prepare a number of topics, because you're not sure if you're going to get the big fish that land, right? I mean, there's no guarantee that a bunch of this stuff goes down right away. There might be a little more to the gestation period, more rumors and conjecture. I remember when Jay Glazer was on our show Super Bowl week, and he told us this might happen, that there might be an Odell Beckham Jr. trade. That he reiterated it with his column at The Athletic a few weeks ago, and then it finally starts to percolate, and it comes to fruition on the show I've had of ours, The Odd Couple. Rob Parker and Chris Broussard got first crack at that one. But you're sitting there, and you have all these ideas of what your show is going to be, and then, we're communicating over the course of the day. Jason and I have, hey, here's a couple of fun things for 45s. Here's trying to put a little bit of a skeleton together, and then all of a sudden, a big deal like that blows up, and what you have is a grid that now becomes, all right, what kind of spider effect can we have? How many legs can we get out, and angles can we get out of a move like this? To put it in perspective, the week prior with Antonio Brown and the rumor to Buffalo happened when I was on air. Jason happened to be out with a switch because he was going to do the morning show. He was going to fill in for Dan Patrick. So I had Dan Byer, my usual Sunday partner, with me, and that news comes down. Everything we'd prepared was gone. We had a whole show laid out, one or two holes of, all right, let's see what works and how we're feeling, and if anything happens in any of the NBA games. And all of a sudden, we get the Antonio Brown's going to Buffalo news. It's like, whoa, okay, and it's NFL Network. So anything that goes that far means they're probably pretty close to something, being consummated. So what did we do? Grabbed a sheet of paper and immediately just started spitballing ideas during a commercial break, sipping down coffee, and trying to figure it out. What does it mean for the AFC North? What does it mean for the Steelers? What does it mean for the Bills? What does it mean for these teams that didn't get him? Oakland and Green Bay and some of these other teams that were on the fringes of the rumor mill. We came up with no fewer than 14 ideas in about 5 minutes of what we could spin, plus the fantasy angle. You just go through it, and that's the type of process you're doing here. When, Jason and I were on air when the Le'Veon Bell news became final. Well, Jason being a Jets fan, that became my personal hell for the next 2 hours.
Yep.
But it also gave us a number of angles. Okay, what does it mean? Can't wait to see what the money looks like, given that he sat out a year, and go through. What does it mean for Sam Darnold? What does it mean the Steelers? Yes, they have James Conner, but going forward for them, what does that locker room look like, etc. And you do the same process, right? There's always an extra sheet of paper there just so you can communicate within. We haven't quite figured out a good hand signal thing, so you just write notes to each other and try to push from there. But it definitely kept the wheels spinning and a lot of adrenaline, and you just wanted to keep going.
Yeah, on a day like that, I can understand why. And as far as it goes with the Jets there, yeah, I trolled a buddy of mine on Facebook who's a Jets fan. I said, oh, you decided to give him the Albert Pujols, I'll pay you for what you did for somebody else contract. So I don't think Jason would be appreciating that take very much.
No, hey, it works, because, there's certainly, there's good and bad with it, right? If you look at the numbers,
yeah,
that, and especially as they came out today, in the end, you're looking at $26 million for 3 years, because we still have to include the year he didn't play because he didn't get a salary. Mm-hmm. So did he win? No, he didn't win. And anybody that tries to spin it otherwise, he may feel good about himself, taking on the league and the process, and didn't want to be around Pittsburgh. Whatever the angles were, and only Le'Veon Bell is ever going to really know everything that went into his decision, no matter how many interviews he does or his agent spins it going forward. But the reality is you paid a pretty penny for a guy who has had some drug test issues, who's had a couple of big injuries, and has had a lot of miles put on his odometer. However, when you look at the way the Jets are set up, you don't really have a number one wide receiver. So you bring in a guy that can catch 70 to 80 balls, as long as you can figure out your offensive line. And I think that's really still where the question lies, because Robbie Anderson in his second-round tender isn't exactly going to scare anybody off. Solid. They got a bunch of solids, but they're all number 2 or number 3 guys, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But Le'Veon Bell coming in there, at that price, not prohibitive and not as problematic. But the scary thing is when we get to, year 2 or year 3, are we looking at another situation whereby, Le'Veon Bell's threatening to hold out, whereby he's, looking for another big pay rise? Say he puts up the numbers he did in 2017, 2 more years. Year 3 of that deal, he's probably looking to re-up, right? And probably force the issue again. So that's the only cautionary tale. If that means in the 2 years, maybe you go and you ascend somewhere, because we're assuming they're still chasing the New England Patriots in the process, that's fine. But, you might be 2 years further down the road, and yes, you've made a little bit of progress, but has it really helped your team for the long term? I think that's the cautionary tale for Jets fans, and certainly one I tried to portray to Jason Smith. But he was having none of it, because visions of Sam Darnold vanquishing the Patriots, much like the statues of St. Michael taking down Satan that you see in cathedrals across this great world of ours, I think that's kind of the vision that Jason had dancing in his head.
Well, again, ever since the return of the Browns, and substantially well before then, because regardless of what revisionists will tell you, the Belichick years here sucked. So for a long time, I've been in Jason Smith's shoes. I understand that. I understand where he's coming from. And I'll get to that with the Browns in a second, but on a general sense with what you're talking about with some of these fantasy guys here, whether it be Bell, whether it be Brown, whether it be ODB, it feels like, I don't know, maybe this is recency bias. I try never to be prisoner of the moment, but it seems like we're getting more fantasy blockbuster guys switching teams this time of year than usual.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely true. I mean, you got guys, there's a lot of money out there. I mean, that's one thing that no matter how you chop it up, you can go get paid wherever you are. You don't have to go to a big city. Everybody gets a giant cut of money out of the TV deals. So, there's never a shortage of dollars and cents to make this work. Now it's just a question of can you get critical mass of those guys and hit on your draft picks to go. But certainly, this is going to be a great off season to write up the changes that go through. Even today, a flurry of activity of players signing, but also a number of cuts of guys who might have had some fantasy relevance where they were. And you look at also the draft itself is going to shuffle a lot of guys around here. I mean, at least the first round is mostly defensive ends and defensive tackles, so maybe not a lot of position guys shifting early. But yeah, it's nice to see the big names moving, and for the NFL, I think that's good for business to push the NBA back to the second level, at least for a couple more days. Yeah,
it really has happened that way. It's totally worked out to where it's the NFL that's on everybody's lips this week, and justifiably so, and it will probably continue to be the same for a couple of days out, even from when we're taping this. But it's a thing where when you look at it, I felt like you hit it right on the mark on Twitter when you were talking about this on both sides of the equation, when you were saying that you were high on the Browns even before this signing, because whether you look at the immediate 24 hours, Sheldon Richardson coming in and giving this team, you got to say, one hell of a front four right now. The Vernon deal the week before, tough to break up that offensive line, but you get a legit pass rusher on the other side. You've already got Ogunjobi there, who's terribly underrated right now, and Myles Garrett, who's a beast when healthy, which he's been the bulk of his pro career, which was a worry coming in. So you were right that it didn't take something like this for the Browns to legitimately be a threat, because it's been building for a while, but then also potentially being a little overvalued at this point. I mean, I hate to admit that, but yeah, I mean, in looking at it now, I certainly think they're a playoff team. I think that it will be a disappointment as a Browns fan if they don't make the playoffs, and I'd say win the North at this point. The way the North is coming back to them, it seems like at the speed of light. So it's really kind of interesting that now the national folks are kind of jumping on the bandwagon of the Browns and what they're going to do. I expect the Browns to be in prime time the maximum number of times next year, but you may be right. When you're looking at the Vegas odds, and what is it, 7-1, I think, to win the AFC, we may be getting just a shade ahead of ourselves here. This team has to actually go out, put it together, and develop the chemistry to be as good on the field as they are on paper.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing. You got a lot of movement, and it's a lot of excitement. I mean, even adding another tight end, right? Another red zone tight end coming in from Kansas City. So, I mean, you got a lot of talent. Now it's a matter of making it gel, and I think everybody loves, at least on some degree, Baker Mayfield. Some may deride the brashness, the boldness. They want their quarterback to just nod and smile like all quarterbacks have. I'm excited to see what he's got for year two, now that you've kind of unleashed it. I mean, Dorsey, we knew from a talent evaluation level you were going to have a significant upgrade coming into last year. It was just a question of how much the ownership would hamper him. And for now, it would appear he's being allowed to build the team he wants to build, which is absolutely amazing to watch, Cleveland, at least on paper, shift from where they were for all those years and being the laughing stock. I caution folks, as we were talking about, whether Josh Rosen's able to get out of Arizona, say, Larry Fitzgerald, during the whole Antonio Brown thing, said, hey, be careful what you wish for. You realize Larry Fitzgerald came in 2004. There have been 16 starting quarterbacks for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
Including Rosen, right? That's not too far off of what the Cleveland jersey is.
Yeah.
So, everybody doing that. But to shift all the way to 17-1 for the Super Bowl when you haven't really even gotten through that first phase of learning how to win and playoff, whatever. Not to say you couldn't. I mean, again, look at all those skill position players. Just a question of, do you have enough footballs to go around when you get down for how you're feeding Landry, feeding Odell, feeding Njoku, getting Nick Chubb, and then whenever Kareem Hunt's reinstated, plus Callaway. I mean, there's just, you get excited about it, and then it's a function of, all right, do these guys all play nights over the course of a year? If you're winning, then it probably works. But I think everybody was also quick to kill off the Steelers. not saying that Dante Moncrief solves everything and slides in immediately in a 1-for-1, but they re-up Pouncey, they re-up Foster. Offensive line's going to be just as formidable as it has been, and James Conner's no slouch, so I don't see them simply retreating into the good night.
I would agree with that, and again, James Washington is a guy that I really liked in the draft last year, so I wouldn't rule out that he, along with Moncrief, could help fill the shoes of Smith-Schuster as he steps up to become a number one at this point. And basically that's what you're looking for. You're looking for Smith-Schuster to at least be a poor man's Antonio Brown. Can either one of those two guys at least be a poor man's Smith-Schuster? I wouldn't rule it out either, Mike.
Now, Washington's got some tremendous upside. I loved him there coming into the year of this past year, a little bit of injuries, and then just trying to, number 3 receivers, how do you get used? Maybe you look at what the rest of the valuation is, right? A guy like Tyrell Williams heads over to Oakland and gets $11 million a year. Wasn't going to get it. That's a member of the Chargers as a number 3. So, same thing here. Washington will see more balls his way, and hopefully that just the consistency of reps and opportunities downfield leads to big things.
I would agree, and a name that you mentioned a minute ago, I want to just go back to that for a second here, because not enough people are talking about it. Everybody's talking about bringing in Kareem Hunt and what that's going to do, and everybody's acting like that's a monster upgrade. This might be a hot take outside of Cleveland, but I don't know that he's an upgrade over Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb showed last year, Mike, that he got the burst back. That's a guy where when you looked at him at Georgia and you thought, boy, if he ever fully recovers to what he was before the knee injury, those guys are unicorns, right? The power backs with that kind of speed. I'm not so sure that Kareem Hunt is an upgrade over Nick Chubb. It might be a hot take to say I don't think he is. I'd still take him if he's reformed his issues and whatnot. But this notion that the Browns automatically upgraded there, I'm not sure I agree with that.
No, I agree. And then it becomes a split. You're not going to replace Chubb.
Right.
It's now figuring out how to work them in tandem.
Right.
Nick Chubb was fantastic, and I think that was one thing lost. As much as everybody loved on Baker Mayfield, I don't think Chubb got the credit for the type of year he was having. Why? Because we get sucked into the quarterbacks all the time. So I think that's one of the big things taking away from this. And it'll be just curious how those two mesh in a backfield. Right on paper, it looks great, but if you're suddenly taking 4 touches from one guy and adding them to the backup or tandem or 1B or whatever the hell we're calling it,
right.
When they split, how does Nick Chubb work with that?
Right.
How does Kareem Hunt work with that? Those are the type of things that, as we sat there and, look, my tag team partner, Mr. Smith, was trying to look at Odell being a guy who could be disruptive and become a problem. And that certainly may be the case.
Sure.
For all the love stories that everybody's telling about what a guy is, and he might be the greatest guy in the world. He's had some issues that have been well chronicled in terms of discipline and insubordination and calling out quarterbacks or whatever. I don't know that necessarily works if you go do that after Baker Mayfield. That suddenly can become an issue. But you also have to make sure the other guys are getting what they need. And it's going to be on Freddie Kitchens. This is going to be to a degree like a college team, making sure you're managing this or on the grander scale a little bit, and maybe hyperbole here, and maybe I'm succumbing to what's been going on, and maybe it's hot take theater. But, to the detriment, of the argument of the legacy of a guy like Phil Jackson. It's like all he did was manage egos. Well, you know what? He did it pretty well with a lot of titles. Freddie Kitchens on a smaller scale, he's going to have a little bit of that in Cleveland with all the star power that's assembled.
I agree with that, but when you look at it, and as a Browns fan, I agree with what you said, but I'm not troubled by it because the number one reason he got that job, he works very well with people. He's got a high emotional IQ, and coming in after Hugh Jackson, that's incredibly important. But again, the mad scientist stuff. When you've got teams, when you're an interim offensive coordinator, and you got teams around the league who are copying you as they were the second half of the season, this guy's running wishbone stuff, whatever. That's what you got to love about Freddie Kitchens, whether you're a Browns fan or not. He doesn't care if you think it might sound stupid or look stupid. He's going to try it. So having a mad scientist with all these weapons, you don't even have to be a Browns fan to say this is going to be entertaining as hell.
Yeah, but here becomes the question. Is he the same guy now that the interim tag's off?
Interesting.
Time will tell, right? Interim tag, you may not have the expectations, which means you may go to that 36th page in the playbook and just say, hey, let's wing this one out and see what happens. Once it's your job to lose, maybe there's a little bit of shift of philosophy and aggressiveness, especially given the veritable, what do we want to call it, the carousel that the coaching job had been for many years there. Perhaps you're not running the same way when Haslam's got the finger on the button of your career now, as opposed to an interim tag.
Interesting point. A little depressing for me as a Browns fan, but an interesting point. We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Didn't mean to bring down the party. No. But here's the baseline to it.
Yeah.
Is that you can be excited about Cleveland Browns football, and that's what Baker gave you for a half a year with Freddie Kitchens.
Sure.
Enough to get him the job. When did you say before that? Manziel arriving just out of morbid curiosity of what that was going to become?
Right.
And when they, and when they got back to Cleveland.
Right.
I mean, that's it. You've got two times in the last 20 years where we've talked about Cleveland Browns football like this. That's
right. It's been limited to this. And interesting little nugget here. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if too many people outside of Cleveland know this. Freddie Kitchens' neighbor in Shaker Heights, Ohio, none other than Geraldo Rivera. Those must be some interesting times in the basement, sipping a few brews. I could just imagine those two guys hanging out together.
Did Geraldo ever come over with the film crew and try to go down into his wine cellar or something?
That would make a great TV special, would it not? But that
there
would.
You go. Here we go. We got no bottle of beer. Great.
Well, as we said, the NFL stuff happening this week. I want to bring it around just to a few more things I know that have been on your radar this week. I'm not the only Cleveland guy you've talked to this week. A guy who was here for a long time, Chris Haynes at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, covering Kyrie Irving when he was in Cleveland as well. And really some fascinating thoughts that you guys were able to get out of him as far as what it was like to cover Kyrie, a very enigmatic fella. I got to say, the enigmatic stuff was really kind of kept quiet the whole time Kyrie was here. There was a lot of now it can be told as soon as he left town, and Chris Haynes continues to contribute to our understanding of all the different layers of Kyrie Irving.
Well, and I think that's one of the big things. We had the Adam Silver discussion, going into where guys are and their questions of, feeling isolated and insecurities in their mental states. And some folks tried to push that off. But, I think we've got a couple of prime examples of guys that you're watching ride the wave of emotions. You got Kyrie Irving in Boston, and you got Kevin Durant out in Oakland with the Warriors. There were two guys that, depending on the day, the world may be collapsing on them, at least in their perception, and then other days, they're the king of the world, and they show you that. And with Kyrie Irving, I think we've seen over the course of this season, very difficult to come back into a team. A lot of first-round picks, a lot of guys with success and pedigree, and guys that won into the playoffs pretty deep without him and without Gordon Hayward a year ago. So for a veteran guy to try to find his place back in there, you say, it's easy. You assert yourself, you got the ring. Maybe not quite so fast, because everybody wants their touches. It goes back to what we were just talking about with the Browns, right? Is that you just, you don't know how people are going to handle different situations when thrust into them. You hope for the best, but sometimes not quite. Chris B. Haynes on Twitter, I retweeted it at Swollen Dome, the article that he put out. But certainly just that roller coaster, even just in the last week, you saw it at the end of one loss where it looked like the world was shattered. And then they win a Thursday night game a week later, smiles, hugs, you name it. Everybody's good. Yep. Great with the media again and back in front of the cameras. And look, we get behind the microphones and we theorize what's going on, and you try to talk to as many people as you can about that know these guys and cover them with some regularity. But, everybody's got a mask they put on in a public persona. And sometimes you don't quite recognize that you may have forgotten it at your locker, and you're showing what your true emotions are. You can't go stone-faced, even though you'd love to. And I think that's where Kyrie Irving sometimes gets caught is that he does wear the heart on the sleeve to a bit, and the emotion ride it goes through it. And maybe it didn't resonate quite as much when he was with Cleveland. Younger guys still kind of just going with it as everything's on the upswing, but then you hit a point between injuries and seeing the young guys on your own team and realizing, hey, my place in this world may not be what it once was, and trying to figure out what's next, especially when you've got so many people whose job it is to try to speculate about what your next move is. That's one of the problems I have with the NBA. As much as I feed into it, but you got to go with what's hot and what's got people tongues wagging in excitement. We're talking more about 2019, 2020 than we are the season currently in process.
Exactly.
That's just the way it is in a superstar league where everybody's expected to move.
Well, yeah, and you are totally right about that. The NBA, maybe more so than any other sport, although the NFL's right up there as far as all the world's a stage. But that also applies to other entertainment industries as well, and that was the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know it was on your radar this week. The actresses who were brought up in this whole college admissions scandal here, you pointed out, I think justifiably so, hey, nobody's talking about Bill Macy. He's married to Ms. Huffman there, and you don't really hear his name out there very much. So some folks manage to remain Teflon even when there's scandal swirling all around them.
Well, that's the question. Did Bill Macy just not have anything as part of it, right? Is where plausible deniability? By the way, yesterday was Bill Macy's 69th birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Bill Macy.
Great one.
Yeah, there you go. But that's the question, right? Look, in every family there's a split of who handles what, and sometimes, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Maybe in this case, Bill Macy, there wasn't enough in terms of the process to say, hey, you're part of this, right? The check comes out of whatever accounts, maybe they couldn't connect him directly. And as I tried to point out, I did a quick periscope when I first heard the news because it became all the rage here in LA because of, USC being part of that, in addition to all the other scandals and problems that they have with the athletic program and going all the way through the university. You've got interim people in important jobs. Lynn Swan today, or I should say for the tape process on Thursday, the talk that, Lori Loughlin's husband on a plane with the then USC athletic director, be it Pat Hayden or Lynn Swan, going to Augusta. So there's all those tentacles, and I just always raise my hand and just say, you know what, think about your own community. Think about how many kids may be going to the schools that aren't in district paying property taxes in the town you're in.
Yep.
But because mom or dad, maybe they were there, but then they couldn't afford to stay in district, or maybe it's just an opportunity with grandma's making address, whatever. And not to simplify it and equate those to one-to-one. Here we're talking about defrauding and creating bogus charities and things of that nature. A lot of this is, legacy. If you've been giving money to a university for 30 years after graduating, or however many years, I'd like to think you get a little more treatment for your kid and a little more consideration if their scores are within the proper lines.
Yep.
Now, if you start making up things that they did, well, I don't know, we've hit a weird gray area, but certainly, the idea that if you can help contribute to a college, because again, meritocracy, as everybody wants to call it, so come on, there's shades of gray in all of it.
Yep.
In terms of an admissions process, because you're trying to find a well-rounded student body and make it as diverse and inclusive as you can. And let's face it, not everybody peaks, gets to their near their ascent, finishing their ascent at age 17 or age 18. Like, I knew kids who were absolutely brilliant in the classroom, but they were the worst test takers you'd ever see.
Yep.
They'd absolutely freeze up. I had a girl that I went to high school with, straight A's, AP classes, you name it. Absolutely bombed the ACT.
Wow.
Absolutely bombed it. And shattered her world. She eventually got to take it again and did better, and with those test scores and everything she'd done, still I think went to the school she wanted to, or at least on the medal stand of, her final choices.
Okay.
But the test was not reflective of who she was in a classroom.
Sure.
And so, likewise, you can have the outlier. I was a great test taker. I was pretty good in the classroom, but I'd sit down because I couldn't study for it. Right? You could study for the type of question and everything else. I'd kick my feet up and have fun.
Uh-huh.
And did pretty well that way. Everybody looks at those things a little differently. So to say that there's one way to get to a proper college. And look, there's enough seats as long as you can pay the bills,
Right.
or somebody, or the government, or via loans and grants or whatever. As long as the bills are getting paid, they can always add a +1.
Absolutely.
There's no question about that. So I don't know that anybody necessarily lost in this process in the consideration when you're getting down to it. But I just remind folks, all the way from the ground, all the way up, there's certain things in the flow of education. As much as you love to think it's clean, it's like we get into this with college sports all the time. You want to talk about how great and pure or whatever it is, make sure you hold your nose while you're watching it.
Excellent points. And again, while some of us might have been surprised by the nature of this when you're talking about glamorous Hollywood stars getting caught up in it, I think on a certain level, we all know this kind of stuff is going on somewhere. And the only remaining thought I have on that is, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, it was flashing into my head, Bill Macy. I know it's a serious subject, but I just can't help but think, if they bring him in to be interrogated, he starts going into that scene from Fargo and acting all nervous.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, no, I mean, between that, I know a couple of people had the gif of the scene from Boogie Nights in the driveway.
Yeah.
And he walks up and he's got that forlorn look. I mean, there's a number of those, and I think the best joke, and I wish I could give credit to the first guy that I saw that put it out, because this plays exactly like something one of his characters would be caught up in.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then for those actresses, the sexy names, not to go into looks or whatever else, but I mean, there's a lot of people of power and influence. You start going down that list, and let's face it, it's the tip of the iceberg. Bill Mickelson on Thursday afternoon released a statement. Yeah, we hired this guy to help us in the process, but we're not part of any fraud. Our kids would kill us. The fact that people now have to make the preemptive statements.
Yeah.
And he claims 761 families. That's a lot of hedge fund managers.
Wow.
That's a lot of Silicon Valley CEOs and big-time moguls in Southern California. And here's the bigger thing. He's only one guy. What else is going on in the rest of the country?
That's a great point. And, and I've been thinking for the last day or so, this might be a thing where it fizzles at some point, we forget about it, but you make an interesting point there. This could become the next Me Too if more revelations about more people start dribbling out.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in perspective, and this is a little of the Periscope, at Swollen Dome on Twitter, you go back in the timeline, the quick Periscope thought is I talked a little bit about my time before getting into the sporting world. Is after graduating from Northwestern, I was working in their financial aid office. That was my work-study job, and they offered me a job upon graduation to work in the grad schools. So I helped every year going through the process, and as people were going to get admitted, I'd get to talk to them about what it would take to do things financially. Let's just say you heard enough when you burst their bubbles of this being their lifelong dream, showing them what the debt level would be, and they'd start cursing at you. So no matter what you tell me about a hot take in sports, I can take it.
Right.
Because I was talking to people about their real lives,
sure,
as opposed to their fictitious fantasy football teams or just their fandom about a team. I think it's okay. You can tell me I suck, and usually people resort to on the fat. Great. Get creative. But the idea is that I in that job, for the time I did it, I caught a number of people perpetrating frauds unlike any other, with maximum, 10, 15 years of prison time if they've been prosecuted to the full extent. So I certainly seen my share on that side of the schooling equations. I can only imagine how many books can be written about what happens in admissions.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, you've probably gleaned a fair amount about that, like you said, from your experiences anyways, as far as what goes on in other parts of the system. But it's one of these things where, again, it's kind of a grim subject to talk about, but again, it just brings it around to all the more important that we have these things to laugh and distract us about and entertain us about, whether it be anything that's going on in Hollywood or our core content that we were talking about here tonight, the NFL, and everything that's going on there. The bread and circuses, Mike, it's what helps us get through the day. Shows like yours that we can tune into, you and Jason Smith or you and Dan Byer on Sundays. Basically, that's what helps us get through all of these real-life things that we're dealing with.
That's it. In the end, try to find a laugh, find a little entertainment, and, well, for Smith and I in that final hour, hoping that we're helping people slide on over, baby.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And, of course, again, you guys on Fox Sports Radio, 7 to 11 Pacific time during the week, 6 to 10 Sunday mornings with Dan Beyer, of course, at Swollen Dome on Twitter, swollendome.com, an excellent site for your own content. So always a pleasure, Mike Harmon. We never take it granted. We're always happy to have you here with us. Thank you so much for making time to break everything down today.
Oh, anytime. Look forward to doing it again soon. We got a lot more free agents to go through.
We got a lot more. We'll get to that and many other subjects as well. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1097.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.